and welcome to another episode of the Genius podcast. You're joined today by Sarah Mitchell, Tizai, and my co-host Joshua Mitchell. And today we're going to be talking about a lot of tech news that's been coming up, and the underlying thread with all of these articles is pretty much with great power comes great responsibility. Because we're looking at, as technology advances exponentially and into realms that we could have never imagined, what are some of the ethical implications involved with some of the advancements that not that are coming, but that are here. So we have to really take a look at what are we willing to allow as a society, and how are we going to define our societal standards moving forward. So Joshua, what I really want to do is I'm going to pretty much run us through the topics, and I want to get your feedback from a person within the industry, and I want to get your feedback as a digital citizen, as somebody who is going to be affected by this. I just want to get your first reactions, that kind of.
For sure.
Yeah. So are you ready to jump into our first article?
Let's do it.
All right. So our first article is about the World Health Organization recommending global standards for gene editing technology.
Whoa.
Yeah. We're jumping into the deep end of the pool here, guys. So just to bring everybody up to speed, the gene editing technology, or maybe I should start with what prompted the World Health Organization to even say we got to put out these recommendations in the first place.
Those twins?
The twins? Oh yes. So in 2018, there was a Chinese scientist that came forward to the scientific community, and he announced that he had successfully edited the genes of human embryos. And he let us know that there were 2 women who were pregnant with these babies, these embryos, and then there was a 3rd woman that was also pregnant with twins. So when we talk about so far how we've been using this gene editing technology has been to make our crops more drought resistant, or to make them resistant to the frost, to make strawberries more resistant to frost. So we've mostly been experimenting on plants and animals. But there's been this big taboo about breaking into the realm of experimenting on humans. And what's crazy is that after this Chinese scientist came forward with this information, it was kind of like a shock throughout the scientific community, as far as people being like, there are scientists who are doing this, and there's no regulation in this particular realm of science.
Are there any regulations on plants and animals right now? Are there any regulations?
Well, in the U.S., if you're selling something that's genetically modified, you have to label it. It has to be, GMO, whatever. You have to label it so that people are aware of what they're purchasing, so they can make a decision as a consumer. Do I want something that's naturally produced, or something that's genetically modified to some degree?
The consumer has a decision.
Yeah, the consumer has to be informed. That's kind of the caveat there, as far as how it's been applied in the States. But the scary part about this on the human front, as far as we talk about human experimentation, is that there isn't a whole lot of regulation out there. On the World Health Organization, with this report, they're putting forth suggestions. They can't enforce anything. They're not a regulatory body. They can only say, hey, this is what we suggest and why, and encourage different world leaders to try to implement some of these things in their own countries, to try to get get everybody on a similar playing field as far as what regulations we're putting forth and enforcing. So just to give you a little bit of understanding, this gene editing technology on the positive side is going to allow for us to eradicate a variety of life-threatening diseases and disorders that are stemmed from mutations in your genome, in your DNA. So sometimes, you're either born with, or as you get older, your body is not replicating your DNA as accurately. So you get deletions or you get additions of specific codes in your DNA, because to break it down even more, your DNA functions as the like the rule book or the instruction manual for your body to execute different functions, as far as how it makes your eye color, manifest for you, or how these proteins are created to do specific functions throughout your body. So by deleting even one codon, you have 4 options, right? You have A, C, G, and T. So all of your DNA is some combination of these 4 codes. These 4 letters are shortened to these letters. So removing one or even swapping a pair can totally dismantle how your body is able to function. Yeah, because when your body is reading your DNA handbook to say, okay, this is a protein I need to make to do this particular function, if the instruction book is wrong, the protein is going to be wrong too. And that's where you start to get the trickle down of these different issues, such as sickle cell anemia, cancer, cystic fibrosis, hearing loss, stuff like muscular dystrophy, all of these crazy things. So the technology that is being utilized to do this gene editing is something called CRISPR. And CRISPR is something that's cheap. It's easy to get access to. It's easy to use. This is something that, like, when I went to Xavier University in Louisiana, we used this technology in the lab to modify, what were we doing? We had C. elegans, and we were trying to modify them so that they would, like, glow in the dark or something, or that their offspring would be, would glow in the dark. That was the gene we were modifying. So to tell you, a group of college students can do this. People are in their garages doing this. As long as you can purchase the CRISPR, it's so CRISPR, this particular technology really began as a mechanism in bacterial cells as a part of their immune system. So they would have something called a Cas9, which is basically like a, you can think of it as like the clippers in the process, right? So you would have a particular RNA tag, right, attached to this protein, and the protein would look for that, kind of like reading through to see where it can identify the specific sequence. And once that sequence is identified, it goes, okay, this is where I clip, and it cuts that piece out. So scientists have been able to basically hijack that mechanism in bacterial cells to do that same kind of like cut function in a variety of other cells.
Clip and snitch.
Yeah, it's like almost like copy and paste.
Yeah.
It's that easy. Because once you've put aside, you say, okay, this is the sequence that I need you to identify. Once you find this is where you cut. And then in order for you to put in the sequence, like for example, if you're trying to cut out a sequence and you're trying to replace it with something else, you would put into that into this cocktail that you're mixing up to inject into the organism, you would add what would be called a homology directed gene repair. So you're basically inputting a templated piece of DNA that you want to be inserted after the Cas9 protein does the cutting function. So it sounds complicated right now, but in application in the lab, it's very, very simple. So it's simple to the point where, like, this Chinese scientist announced to the world that he did this, and after he did that, there are a lot of people. I don't want to call them like anarchists, but they're basically people who are like, if this technology exists, it should be accessible to everyday people. That's the argument. So we're kind of
So the technology of CRISPR is available to everyone to use.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, you can order this stuff.
It,
I think you probably have to have, like, a business license. Like, you
mhm.
can't just be Joe Blow off the street ordering. It's kind of like these medical supply companies that supply these labs and stuff. Like, these are the people who you're going to order from.
So it sounds like this is turning into a business, if not already a business of
Manufacturing
yeah.
this specific gene editing kit.
Right, or yeah, putting the kit together and giving, I guess the layman or the everyday person the ability to edit their own genes, right? So would that also be applied to their children? Could they?
Yeah,
They
so
then?
that's one of the I guess kind of like red flags or ethical issues that the World Health Organization identified in their report was when you modify your DNA, the edits that you make are passed down from generation to generation. So you're not just impacting yourself, you're impacting all your whole lineage, like all of your kids, your grandkids, anybody who comes next. And the danger is you don't know how those changes are going to affect those organisms that come behind of you. You don't know if there's going to be whenever our cells, replicate and they try to replicate our DNA, there's a potential for error there. You don't know how, your changes are going to be impacted down the line as cells replicate and replicate and replicate over and over and over again. So there's a lot of unknown there.
And I guess as a parent, or as a parent, you could do this with your children, but then that brings in the question of consent. Yes.
Yeah. So that's a big issue because it's like you yourself can give consent
Hmm.
to modify your own DNA, but your children can't give. They're not even born yet. What consent could they possibly give? Or your grandkids? There's just nothing.
And so I see some similarities between, I guess, plastic surgery and gene therapy, right? To where the vanity concept comes in, right? Where we have a tool that can help us medically, but that same tool can also help to satisfy our vanity,
So
right?
we're
Such
talking
as
about being, as a parent,
yeah,
you being able to select for eye color. You as a
or
parent
muscle
being
mass,
muscle mass, saying, I want my
height.
child to be stronger, more athletic. All of these things are your DNA writes the script for all of this.
Hmm.
So if we could just willy-nilly go in and say, these are the building blocks of life, we willy-nilly just saying that, well, this is what I want, like you're in a cafeteria picking out what you want your baby to look like, how you want your baby to grow, like physically.
Hmm. Hmm.
It creates opportunity for a type of like DNA dystopia.
And it creates the opportunity for a superclass, right?
Correct.
And then we also talk about where the testing of this gene therapy and gene modification is occurring. There's speculation that a lot of these tests are happening in impoverished stricken
Countries.
areas.
Yep.
Yes.
That's another big issue that
Right.
report brought up.
Yep. And so they're saying that they're testing in these areas that basically don't have resources, and that they may be given small incentives to have these tests done on their populace. But when the gene
When the
therapy
technology becomes available,
mainstream,
who can afford it?
exactly. So those people that were a part of the pilot testing may not
guinea
have
pigs.
access. Yeah, that were the guinea pigs may not have access to the final product once it hits the modern market. So that's a huge issue, as well as the superclass. Going back to the superclass concept.
Creating an
So,
elite class of
yeah.
human beings.
So right now, what really separates our class structure is
Economics.
finances and economics. Now being able to apply another layer on top of that, where physically you might be at a better point than somebody unnaturally, such as having having more body mass,
Being stronger, faster.
being able to hold your breath longer, having heightened senses of sight, or what have you. You could edit your genes to various levels to make yourself more powerful or more intelligent than the next person, and that's not happening in a natural way. So how can we as a society or as a or the World Health Organization be able to come up with something that that is pliable and useful to everyone, right? To where that there's not this this difference or this huge gap in between those that have natural genes and those that have genetically modified genes, right?
So what the World Health Organization is putting forth as far as recommendations would be that there would need to be a registry that all scientists would contribute to. So anybody who is doing research in this specific field would have to basically let everybody else know what they're doing, what their results are. And then let's see. It would also allow a mechanism for whistleblowers. So if somebody is doing something that's unethical, this would allow a mechanism for that to be reported in some way. Well, that's what they're suggesting. Again, none of this can be mandated because they can't enforce laws in all the countries around the world. That has to be done on a country-by-country basis. And scientific journals are also, encouraging scientists to, bring the knowledge into the group so that everyone can know what's going on and so that we can really address the ethical side of all of this together. Because you have, the rogue scientists out in the middle of nowhere just doing whatever, and it creates an opportunity for a lot of chaos. And you just don't even know, like, I think that's the scary part. Like, we don't know the ramifications of this long term because it's going to take generations for us to see the impact of this. Because with each generation that, these genes are passed down to, we're going to see how that can impact the general population.
I'm very interested to see the lineage of the twins from the Chinese
this Chinese experiment, right?
Yeah. I'm very interested to see how that.
Well, that was in 2018, so we're in 2021 now. Those kids gotta be like toddlers now.
Yep. Okay. Anything else there?
No, that's kind of it. Like, the big takeaway is this is kind of like the big thing, like, with grade. Just because we can, does that mean we should?
I say that a lot. Just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Yeah, so things to think about. Because it's like, it kind of blows my mind because when I was attending Xavier University and we were doing scientific literature as a class, we were discussing this in a hypothetical situation. Like, we're at the point where we're trying to use this groundbreaking technology to eradicate these terrible diseases from our populace. But what happens when people want to use it for other things? And I remember sitting in class and everybody was like, that could never happen. Like, we would never let that happen as a society, but here we are and it's happening. And it's terrifying because I could remember sitting thinking, like, what a world that would be to live in. And we're here.
Well, so speaking of worlds to live in, it seems like some people are trying to get off the world and try to do some
Segway King
exploration in other areas where gene modification might be the new norm.
Very true.
Right? So that brings us to space tourism, yes?
Correct. This brings us to our next topic. So, the future of space tourism. This is a whole new industry that is, like, coming to the forefront. And I know some of you have heard that these billionaires are trying to go up into space. Well, one is gone and come down already, and then another, Jeff Bezos, is about to go up. So, just to give you a quick kind of overview of what's happened, Richard Branson he's gone up to space with his business Virgin Galactic. And then later this week, Jeff Bezos is going to be heading up to space with his company, Blue Origin.
Virgin Galactic went up on July 11th, this past Sunday.
Yep. So this is kind of opening. Up until this point, you went to space if you were an astronaut.
period.
Yeah, like you had to train in 16 different fields to even be eligible to be on a spacecraft to go to space. And now if you have enough money, you can go to space.
Yep.
So let's look at, so the two companies are utilizing two different, they've developed two different types of technology to kind of get into space.
So those two companies are Virgin Galactic is the owner is Richard Branson, and then Blue Origin is owned by Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon.
Correct. So the first one we're going to talk about is Virgin Galactic. So they have this like two-part method, to get into space. So first, the company has a custom-built high-flying airplane that they attach the spacecraft to. The airplane flies to about 45,000 feet, and from that point, the spacecraft like rockets up into space because it's easier. You have less gravity as opposed to just blasting off from the ground.
Yep.
The ground. During their last flight, Virgin Galactic reached 55 miles above the Earth. And to kind of put this in perspective, the kind of boundary line that has been defined by NASA as far as like where does the Earth's atmosphere end and where does space begin is between 50 to 62 miles.
Okay.
That's it's called the Kármán line.
Kármán line, yeah.
Correct. That's called the Kármán line. So they got up there. So the Virgin Galactic mission, so other than Richard Branson, they had mostly mission specialists on that vessel.
Correct.
So they had pilots on the vessel, and once the spacecraft went up, it basically like glides back down to the Earth.
Correct.
So that's how it lands. So they spend like a couple minutes in space, but they're not just like up there for
I think it was like 4 or 5 minutes that they were actually where they experienced zero gravity was about 4 or 5 minutes. And now, you're thinking 4 or 5 minutes may not be that long, but when you're
there, it feels like forever.
There, I'm pretty sure it feels like forever. So yeah.
Yeah. So just to kind of give people an idea of what these tickets may be going for, people who have invested in the company so far on the premise that they're getting a ticket, they made investments of $250,000.
$250,000.
Yeah, I said that wrong.
Yeah.
$250,000. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, so Richard
We're
Branson,
not going to space anytime
Virgin
soon.
Galactic, it's
This is
about
for the elite.
It's about $250,000, but Blue Origin didn't have any data to provide to us on how much
they intend to charge
for
tickets to get to space.
Correct.
And the Blue Origin kind of method of getting to space is like a traditional rocket launch. The rocket, shoots up into the atmosphere, and there's a capsule that contains the passengers. So, once the rocket gets to a certain height, it ejects the capsule, and the capsule kind of just goes. That is not piloted.
No, it's
by people.
It's brought down by a parachute.
By a parachute, yeah. That kind of scared me a little bit because I was like, oh.
Yep.
Are we gonna just depend on a parachute to get us back safely? Cool. Let's see what else. So that one had a lot more like passengers on it compared to the Virgin Galactic one.
One of the passengers was, so I think Jeff took his brother. There was a unnamed lottery winner. And then there was also an astronaut that trained to go to space. I think it was maybe like in the 70s. Don't quote me, but I think it was the 70s. And they took him with
he trained to go to space, but they just never took him that time.
Correct.
So this was his chance to get to space.
So I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, that's cute.
That's
a good PR.
Yeah,
that's a PR
right.
move.
Yep. But for us, it's gonna be years before we're able to get up there. It's going to be years. I'm
It's like
looking.
gene editing. This isn't intended to be accessible to the everyday person.
We're talking.
The everyday person isn't just going to space.
At least a
on a trip.
decade, maybe more. At least a decade before you'll start to see commercial flights be available, like you see them to fly from
Like
St.
tourism,
Thomas
like you're gonna go visit
to New York,
anywhere.
right? Yep. So yeah, I think that's it on space tourism.
Yeah, that's pretty much it on space tourism. The next topic that I kind of wanted to get your feedback on was insurance companies are now offering policies to protect people like from the impact of cyberbullying.
Oh yeah.
And there's kind of like another side of the coin where there's a opportunity to protect the bully, which is a little weird to me, but it's kind of a part of how the policy is built. So these policies are designed to cover the costs associated with being a victim of cyberbullying. So this covers things like legal fees, mental health services is kind of like the big one. Tutoring if the child like has to miss school as a result of the bullying.
Relocation fees.
Yeah, so if you have to leave the school, go to another school, another state, it'll help to cover those relocation fees. In the case of like adults, these policies are mostly targeted towards like school age children, but there are some
adults can be
application.
covered too.
Correct, there is application for adults. So for example, lost wages due to wrongful job termination. So like if your account gets hacked and the hacker is posting offensive stuff and you get fired because of those posts, it would cover your lost wages as a result of that termination.
Damage to reputation, I believe is what it falls under. Yeah.
Legal counsel is covered there as well. And to give you an idea of how people are kind of using it right now, about 10% of people with electronic devices have some type of insurance to help them recover from it's both cyberbullying and cyber attacks. So it technically isn't just about cyberbullying. There are some policies that offer protection for other types of cyber attacks.
So I would be interested to know what those other cyber attacks were. But when we look at
ransomware is real popular these days.
Yeah. I would definitely assume ransomware. But I mean, geez, that would be a big insurance claim, right? You know,
that's what I'm saying. I was surprised that they were even offering this.
Yeah, that would be if I'm a multi-million-dollar company and I become subject to a ransomware attack, that would be a
think about a company
claim.
Like the Colonial Pipeline, like that jam up their supply lines.
I forget the companies that just went through the big outage in Texas, but due to the electrical grid, and we'll get to that momentarily. But if they were to submit an insurance claim, that would be a large ticket. So I would be curious to know how much these policies are for that type of coverage. That would be real interesting to me. And then when I think of 10% of you said 10% of those who have
electronics have some type of policy at this time.
That's a small number.
I thought that was a lot considering this is a fairly new.
Well, I mean, okay, yeah. I mean, if we consider that it's a fairly new concept, something that they're rolling out. I mean, people may have created custom policies with their already current insurance provider to try to cover some things. So I guess this is like specifically for like a specific policy instead of like a custom policy that you're creating for your business or something, right? So I guess I could see that. But then it also said that there were 75% of the people that were polled, 75% of them said that they would be unwilling to pay for more, right? They would be unwilling to, if they had to, let's say, pay for, let's say it was $100 a month for the policy to increase, 75% of those people polled,
they would drop the policy.
They would drop the policy, right? So I'm interested to see.
I'm not even trying to pay my car insurance.
Right.
That's so, like I legally have to have that.
I'm interested to see how much these policies are, and I'm interested to see how many policies are being sold.
Actually utilized.
And then I'm interested to see how many claims are being used from those policies, right? Because maybe if the insurance companies come out with some of those metrics, it may increase the number of people that need the policies because they're aware or more aware of the potential pitfalls that they might come into, or they might be seeing other people going through these things, and that might that might be the catalyst that compels them to get a policy. So I'm interested to see if the insurance companies come out with those metrics. I know that revealing those metrics might hurt the bottom line in some areas, but I think that
I was supposed to say, I feel like that's something they would hold close to their chest.
Yeah, they are, but it's also the information that we need to make an informed decision on if we want the policy or not. So we
that's
need the
important.
information.
So kind of an interesting bit about how these policies are applied. We've mostly been talking about it from the victim point of view, but they can be applied to the perpetrator of cyberbullying as well. So this application would help the families who are being sued, like, because parents are held accountable if your child is the one who is the bully, like the parents are sued. So this would help those parents cover legal expenses. So that's that application.
I don't know if I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I was like, y'all could pay y'all legal bills. Like, if you have a dirty child that's willing to rake up all the children at school and they just doing all of this, like, parent your child properly or pay the legal fees, because you're obviously letting them run wild.
And that I just don't.
It seems like a cop out to me.
Yeah, I don't think that fun should be put towards the person that committed. Well, I mean, I guess you have to.
Kids are cruel, bro.
Yeah,
and the internet has given comfort for these little internet gangsters to do and say what they want out of people's life.
But we're also in a country that we believe innocent until proven guilty, right? So even in the court of law, we might have seen the bullying happening, but when it gets to the court of law, it's what you can prove. So
the internet don't go away. You can't delete. Like, that shit is there forever.
Yep. And so I mean that brings into the how do you safeguard yourself from this, right?
Yeah.
How can you potentially be how can you be proactive about the situation and protect yourself? And so we talked about in one of our previous podcasts about being a good digital citizen, right? And what that means. And so some of the things that you can do to protect yourself from cyberbullying is one, act online as you would act in public.
Face to face. Like, if you wouldn't tell this person this in the street, when you see them face to face, like, keep it to yourself.
Right. That's a great rule of thumb, right? Kind of akin to treat others how you want to be treated, right? Don't treat someone poorly online just because you see a digital representation of them, because that can leak over into the real world and have real world consequences, right?
What do you think now that everything opening up, people getting shot, like the violence has gone up because all of these internet gangsters talking about on site, everything is on site. So now that they're out the house and they really see you as on site.
It's on site, right?
And people feel empowered, like.
The living behind your computer does not give you protection, right? There's a lot of kids, adults as well, who have.
No, where do you think these kids learning it from?
From the adults,
yeah.
Who have a sense of comfort and security because they're doing something behind their phone,
the screen,
or behind their computer, behind
this
the veil of the screen, right? And that veil is fictitious. It's a facade. It doesn't exist, right? Whatever you put out online, you're putting out into the world, and so there's real world consequences that come with that, right? So take that as a rule of thumb. As well, don't share your passwords. Right?
Yep, that's a big one.
Create strong
especially these
passwords.
Kids, man. Don't share your passwords.
With friends, you might have one friend one day that's your best friend. The next day
week,
might be your worst enemy, right? I don't know how many friends and that I gained and lost when I was in school, right? So if you're
even as an adult, bro.
Even as an adult, right? So you're sharing around your passwords is not a good thing to do. Keep your passwords safe and keep them strong. We had a previous podcast about how to create strong passwords and how to safeguard your digital identity. So if you want more tips on that, you can go check our past podcast. I believe that was either episode 7 or 8. You can check that out on YouTube or the podcast app. And then also, To know the platform's rules. So whatever platform that you're using, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube.
When we get to Trump,
yep,
this is where he get hooked up, dog.
That's the segue. You got to know your platforms. You got to know the policies of these platforms, so you
what
know
do they allow?
what you can do and what steps you can take if somebody tries to harm you, right? So you need to know both sides. Okay, so I would say act as you would online if you were in the real world. Protect your passwords and know the rules and limitations of the platforms that you're using.
And update often.
And update often.
Because these updates, people don't like to do the updates, but when these updates come up, a lot of times they have bug fixes and they have security patches.
Security enhancements
for
and patches, yep.
vulnerabilities to help, prevent people from hacking into a vulnerable system. So it's important to keep all your updates, current.
Yeah, and so, we talk about being a good digital citizen and knowing what we can and cannot do on platforms. You want to speak a little bit?
Number one.
Yeah, speak about our one of our past presidents.
I wouldn't even give him that much dignity, man. He's wildin' and still wildin'. So Donald Trump is suing a series of social media
Facebook,
technology
Twitter,
companies.
and Google.
Somehow he left YouTube off of there, and YouTube definitely was like, we don't want you on YouTube.
Well, so YouTube is owned by Google.
Oh, okay, that's the
Yeah,
link.
yep,
Okay,
yep.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So Trump filed a class action lawsuit in federal court in Florida. I don't know why he picked Florida. I guess he feel like them as the people. Well, every day something crazy happens in Florida.
That's interesting. I didn't know that it was
like all of his stuff is in
New
Jersey and New York. So I was like, why would he file this in Florida? He feel like the laws would be more
potentially the laws might be different there.
Lean towards him a little better.
He also might have some influence in Florida.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, he also might have some influence in Florida and influence. There was another point that I just had. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, so he's filing this this lawsuit in a federal court in Florida, and he's alleging that the tech giants are censoring him and other conservatives, violating his First Amendment right to free speech.
Can you tell the people what the First Amendment is, just in case they don't know?
So the First Amendment is intended to protect free speech, freedom of religion, and the right to peaceably assemble.
Gotcha.
The problem with that, though, as his premise for his lawsuit, is that the First Amendment is intended to prevent the government from making restrictions on speech, religion, and so on. It says nothing about private companies. Mm-hmm. All of these are private companies. So this seems to be more of a publicity stunt. Mm-hmm. Intended to curry favor with his base,
and so
to kind of drum up the troops a little bit.
Yep, and so let's talk about why he was banned from these platforms. So this was a ban that happened after the January 6th, the Capitol riot, and there was some. There was, I believe, since December.
There was a fear of more violence.
Yeah, there was a trend of information, of false information.
Leading up to
Since December 2020, there was a series of tweets and posts on social media platforms that were giving out false information about the elections. We're giving false information about how the government was handling said elections. And then getting closer to the election date, to when the Electoral College votes were voted, were validated and counted, he was not charged, but he was cited with trying to start a riot, or basically put the fire behind
encourage his supporters to
come out and do something, right? So the social media companies basically said, hey, we need to cut off his access to this global community because he might incite more violence, right?
Yeah.
So Facebook has a advisory board, and their advisory board looked over Facebook's stance.
The content in question, and
they looked over the content in question and the stance at which they took on banning Trump. I think the first ban was, I think it was two weeks 2 weeks.
Oh,
And
they
then
put him in Facebook jail.
yeah. And then they extended it to 2 years, right? So right now the ban is for 2 years, and at the 2-year mark, Facebook will go and reevaluate if Trump should be let back onto the platform.
Imminent.
Yep. Twitter and Google, the bans right now are indefinite.
Yeah. They're like, don't come back.
Yeah, there hasn't been any talk about lifting or reassessment. So that's kind of where things are right now from their standpoint, from the social media company standpoints. One of the First Amendment attorney, Floyd Abrams, this is what he said about Trump's suit. He said that it was irredeemably frivolous. Blah, blah, I can't talk today. Basically saying that you have no
have a
footing.
Foot to stand on.
Yeah. You don't. There's no substance to what you're trying to say, because the First Amendment protects from the government trying to censor you, not social media companies trying to censor you,
or any private company,
or any private company trying to censor you. And so that brings us to a quick note about Section 230. Section 230
because Trump was trying to strip that while he was in office.
Yeah, Section 230 is one of the best things that has happened to our online media and like blogs and media outlets and content houses, right? Section 230 of the Communications Act provides social media companies with more protection than the First Amendment requires. Okay, it basically gives social media companies the protection that if people come onto their platform and start spewing hate speech or talk ill against the government, or do things that violate the policy and procedures and terms and conditions of the platform, the companies can't be sued, right? So if you go and post some hate speech below on a Facebook post and in the comment section, Facebook can't be sued for that, right? The company itself can't be sued for that. So underneath this Section 230, Facebook is saying, hey, we have the protection to safeguard us against being sued by someone else based upon the comments or the content that is put onto the platform and the people that we allow or disallow on the platform. Okay, so the social media companies are using Section 230 to basically give them the foundation of why they decided to censor Trump. Okay, Trump's stance is he believes that the companies are misinterpreting Section 230, and that through that misinterpretation is where he finds his footing in this suit. That these companies are misinterpreting their power, and that they are actually violating his constitutional right. So we'll see how that plays out. The only other big issue here that Trump could stand on would be if his lawyers, his legal team, are able to prove that these social media companies were coerced by the government to ban Trump. Okay, so if these private companies acted on being coerced by the United States government, then that would be a violation of Trump's First Amendment rights. And so that's where he might have some footing. But as it stands right now, I read the entire Section 230 of the Communications Act, and it doesn't seem like he has any footing there. But we'll see what the judge does.
This is just a PR thing, because if history has taught us anything, is that his followers don't listen to reality, they don't listen to reason, they listen to him. And whatever he says is their reality. And that's the dangerous part that I think these technology companies recognize. Like, they could not continue to give him a platform to rile these people up, because look at what they did. Mm-hmm. They attacked the very foundation of our democracy. Like, that is the most un-American thing I've ever seen in my whole life from people who claim to be all about America. They're about America. They're not about the USA.
Yep. And so one other thing before we transition. So I'm of two minds about this, and this is I'm usually not of two minds about topics when they're concerning Donald Trump, but excuse me, this one I am. The censorship of Donald Trump, I think, was right. However, censorship and putting that power in private company hands might not be the best decision.
Do you feel like a board, like what Facebook did, is better?
I like that Facebook has a board to kind of govern and mitigate how Facebook rules on what is able to be censored or not. I do like that. However, it is still a board that is governed by a private company.
That is selected by Facebook.
Right? I bring up the example that I personally had to deal with, or that I personally saw. Amazon. Back to Mr. Jeff Bezos and his platform. Amazon removed some books by Minister Louis Farrakhan. Okay, this was about 2, maybe 3 years ago, but I think about 2 years ago. And so they removed some books from Amazon, citing that they were hate speech. The books in question talk about and it talk about some research that identifies some of the Jewish community's role in
slavery.
In slavery. And so I found that to be quite interesting. So I wanted to purchase the books and I wanted to read them. Come to find out, they have been removed from Amazon based on hate speech. And so I did a little more research and I found numerous books on the Amazon platform that had very similar, if not more egregious, hate speech in them. So that led me to the question of
why target Farrakhan?
Why
over, like, if you gonna hold Lakana, like, be consistent.
Correct.
Keep that same energy.
Correct.
Basically.
And so that consistency of who is doing the checks and balances, that's where Donald Trump might be able to find some footing as well. Because if we leave this power only to the private companies, then that gives them ultimate authority to decide what goes on the platform and what doesn't. And that just doesn't leave to be a free marketplace, a free enterprise, a free community as we know it to be here in the United States.
Or that we like to champion so much.
Correct. So I'm interested to see how this plays out, because this, for how adamant that Donald Trump is about his stance, this could start a precedent for how social media companies are viewed and how their power is viewed as a private institution. As a private institution versus the power of the government, right? So definitely keep eyes on this case. I'm pretty sure that it will be headline news, right? It'll be headline news front and center. But definitely keep watch, because it's going to set the foundation, or one of the stones of the foundation of how social media companies and other just tech companies that we use pretty much 24/7, and how they're able to censor us, how they're able to censor content, and how they're able to allow or disallow members onto the platform.
Hey, society falls apart, and it starts with the banning of books, the burning of books, making things less accessible.
And so, we talk about lawsuits, and Trump has his lawsuit. We also now have another big, not social media company, but technology company that's dealing with a $7 billion lawsuit over in the United Kingdom.
Ooh.
Sarah, you want to?
I love it.
Yep.
So our next article is Apple is considering pulling out of the UK market due to a patent case that they're dealing with. So here's the quick and dirty. Optics Cellular Technology is a company that has made their business buying a crap ton of patents and then suing the pants off of anyone who they think is using their patents. They're not actually producing any technology. They're just accumulating patents and then suing everybody who they think are using the patents.
That's a common practice, by the way. There's a lot of companies that do that. They just buy patents and wait for somebody to infringe upon them to sue them.
So they could sue them.
Yeah.
Then that's how they're getting their money. And to give you an idea, the first case that they successfully won was somewhere about $507 million. That ended up being overturned. But now this new case that is like sending Apple in a head spin, Optic Cellular Technology is suing Apple for patent infringement for $7 billion.
It's a lot of pennies.
Yeah, so Optics filed the suit when Apple refused to pay the licensing fees for using standardized smartphone technology in its products, which helps phones connect to 3G or 4G technology. This seems like real like basic stuff. Like how the phone gonna work if it can't connect to 3G, 4G? That just
Correct.
doesn't make sense to me. Let's see. Many experts have said that this is a danger of allowing patent trolls like Optics Technology to extort money from companies by stockpiling patents. These companies amass troves of patents that they never intend to use to make commercial products, which we just talked about. So the whole point is just to sue other people.
And so I forget her name, but the leader of the legal team for Optis, that's how you said it, right? Optis Cellular. Excuse me, I'm saying that wrong. Optic
Cellular Technology.
Yep.
Yeah.
Optic Cellular Technology. They're basically saying that, well, the iPhone is a great device, but it can't work without all this other technology that is in it. So Apple designs it, but a lot of the hardware that's inside of it is a combination of all these other technologies. Just Apple, it just frames it and positions it in a unique way, which makes their phones work, which is all true. It's very, very true. However, Apple is basically playing a game of chicken with this company right now, and with the judge that is presiding over this, because the judge basically came out and said, well, there's no evidence that Apple is just going to leave the United Kingdom market.
They're like, you gonna really leave?
They're like,
you really gonna just leave?
He's gonna leave and not pay us?
Apple's like, hell
and
yeah.
Apple's like, yeah, like
we out.
We're a $1 trillion company. You're asking for $7 billion. We're a $1 trillion company.
We work hard for that $7 billion.
And you have a lot of consumers of our products in the United Kingdom. If this makes us leave, you're going to have a lot of unhappy citizens.
Oh, they're gonna be pissed.
In your country.
They're gonna be pissed,
right?
Because we already have people that fly to the US from China just to get those unlocked iPhones to bring back and resell in China.
So now
that's gonna increase that tourism to buy iPhones in the US.
And I'm of the mind to think that if the UK really presses them, I don't put it beyond Apple to start closing down shop.
They would be like, oh, word. Hey, Angela still with Apple?
Yes.
Over retail?
Yes.
Hey, Angela, go collect them keys from the Spain Apple store, from the UK Apple store, from the French Apple store. Go collect them keys. Let's go. Yep. Shut it down. And it sucks that this, because the person it sucks it's come to this, but the person that is going to feel it and suffer the most is the consumer. The consumers.
Right? Is the consumer. So these big tech wars and lawsuits and everything, the Apple might have to pay, or this company might have to pay in these legal fees, et cetera, but at the end result is that the consumer is going to hurt the most. So I'm interested to see how this lawsuit pans out, because I think it's also going to set some foundations to how these patent trolls are going to be able to operate in the future. Just companies that are just stockpiling these patents, trying to figure out who they can sue next. In the world of capitalism, it's a fair strategy. It's a very, very grimy and nasty strategy, but it's not against the law. So Apple right now is basically playing chicken with the United Kingdom to say, hey, either you guys are going to bend first and tell us that we don't have to pay this, or it can be a lesser amount, or you're going to stand firm, tell us that we have to pay it, and we'll opt not to and just leave the country. So we'll see. We'll see. I think that moves us on to. I'm done with Apple. I think that moves us into our last topic. Just a little quick recap about some of these electrical grid problems here in the United States. We've been seeing a lot of unusual high temperatures, especially in the southern states, especially in my home state.
The heat waves are coming, boy.
Yeah, especially in my home state of Texas. Texas is it is unbearably hot.
You could fry an egg on the sidewalk.
Man. In Texas, it's always been hot, but it's nothing.
Climate change is real.
Man, climate change is real, right? And so, I was talking to my sister a couple of days ago, and she was telling me, we're getting calls and letters from our energy company saying they're giving us what is it? Not specified times, but they're giving us recommended settings for our
to lower the
environment.
consumption.
Only use our AC during certain hours. Keep your AC
on a certain degree.
Putting your AC at 78 degrees in Houston, Texas. You
might as well just not turn the AC
I'm
on.
gonna lose 10 pounds sweating. Are you serious? Right? They're saying that
jamming up that AC 66.
Mm-hmm, they're saying that because of the high stress that's being put on the electrical grid. Right? There's a lot of high stress that's being put on the electrical grid because a lot of people are at home right now.
That's like in LA too.
It
happens
Angeles,
a lot
right?
in LA.
Yep,
everybody want to put the AC on.
Those rolling blackouts happen because the grid on California is being overused. Right?
There's only
and
so
we're
much.
We're going to see it down here in the southern states as well. As it gets hotter, there's more people home post-COVID still that are still working from home.
Learning from home.
All the grid is being used a lot more than it has in the past, and it's being used a lot more just within these past 18 months because of the pandemic, right? And so the electrical grid is one of our biggest infrastructures.
It's a critical
infrastructure and one of the biggest infrastructures here in the United States. And so when we look at these infrastructures and who owns them and who's operating them, 90% of the infrastructure that basically supports our entire economy is privatized. Meaning that 90% of the companies that run our electrical systems, that run our water systems, that run our railway systems, that run our transportation systems, our oil pipelines, all of those companies are private companies. Okay? And so if these private companies are being consistently targeted with cyber attacks, right? What is going to happen to our infrastructure if our entire electrical grid goes down? What happens if our entire water filtration system goes down? What happens if our railroads? What happens if the computers at the airports go down? Right? What happens to our economy if
these hackers have been targeting hospitals, police stations,
meat
packers,
meat packer companies, right? We have to figure out how we can better protect ourselves as individuals, but definitely as companies that are controlling the majority of our infrastructure as a nation,
as a society.
And so when we look at the electrical grid, there's about 250 companies that basically control or
a majority of the market.
The majority of the market. The 250 companies that control how our electrical grid is working. Okay, and so those 250 companies, they need to start to install and integrate cybersecurity protocols to protect themselves from these cybersecurity attacks. Out of those 250 companies, there's about 125 of them that have started to
take actionable steps.
To install some protocols, to bring in some IT specialists, some cybersecurity specialists, to do some surveys to figure out what technologies where the vulnerabilities are, and what solutions they can provide to the company to safeguard them. The other 125, they're still on the fence, right? Because hiring a cybersecurity specialist, well,
I know there's a
sick,
large cost involved, but
right. So as a private company,
there's a lot at risk.
As a private company, I built my company to do this one specific service, right? Boom. I built my company, but now we're a multi-million-dollar company, and in this one industry, my company is responsible for 60% of the infrastructure. Okay, well, if our company goes down, that means 60% of the country won't have power. Okay, so now is it my responsibility to spend the money to safeguard my company because the citizens might lose power, or is it the government's responsibility to help me as a private company to be to better support the citizens of the nation?
Because it's President Biden that's mandating, not that he's mandating, but he's trying to get any company that is involved in this type of critical infrastructure to take these preventative steps, so that we have less of a, we've been existing in a reactionary mode where, like, if something happens, ooh, we're going to react and try to fix it. And Biden is trying to encourage these companies to take a more proactive role to prevent these things from happening in the first place.
But taking that proactive role means the CFO.
It's a larger upfront cost.
Yep, the CFO is now going to come to that next board meeting, and he's going to look at, okay, well, now there's this new line item for cybersecurity. It's going to cost us $250,000, $300,000 to hire somebody to get downtime so we can actually put in the cybersecurity protocols, then test them, et cetera, et cetera. Going through that whole phase is going to cost us $250,000. How fast are we going to do this? Is it within the budget right now?
That's why some people are kicking the can down the road a little bit.
Yep. Do we have the funds to put over to that type of research and development right now? Is the government going to come out with any financial incentives to help offset some of these costs before we put them out? That's kind of where the conversation is right now with the electrical companies. Is they're trying the remaining 125. They're trying to see if President Biden and his administration are going to come out with financial incentives to offset those costs before
subsidies.
They just subsidies, instead of they just go out and go right into the profit line and say, you know what, we're just going to move some of that profit over to this line item. No, we're going to wait to see if we move that over. Do we get a tax incentive? Do we get special lobbying? Do we get something as a private company to compensate us for having to do more work to help the United States citizen?
Be more
Not
stable.
necessarily our customers, but the United States the United States electrical grid infrastructure as a whole. Not just our part, but as a whole.
Securing the whole grid, yeah.
Correct. And so
we're only as strong as our weakest link.
And I failed to mention this, the parts that need to be protected. Okay, it's two layered. One layer is the operational technology, right? Being able to safeguard your email accounts with passwords. Being able to secure your servers, right, with monitoring software and strong authentication protocols. Things like if you're doing collaboration software through like Microsoft Teams or Google accounts or things like that, making sure all of those operational layers of your company have monitoring services on them and have a security layer to help safeguard you against cybersecurity. Cyber attacks.
Cyber attacks, yeah.
The other half of that is the actual equipment, right? So there's some companies in other industries that don't rely on equipment to run their services, but companies that are electrical-based companies or water-based companies or farmers, etc. They have
fabrication.
Yeah, right. They have large pieces of equipment.
Computers are doing the work.
Yep, that may be read by digital sensors or may need to connect to a certain server to relay information. So if those are compromised, right? If those are
Spells big
compromised,
trouble.
if you have, let's say, in your electrical facility, you have 4 generators or 4 turbines or what have you, and a hacker is able to bring down and stop 2 of them from working, right?
Your
2 of them
capacity
from
goes
working,
down.
your capacity goes down 50%, and if that 50% yields to 10 million people not having power,
That's a problem.
right? That's pretty
Now
significant.
your customer service line is ringing off the hook.
Right. So there's a lot of facets to this, but one of the first steps is the companies looking at the areas of the company that need to be secured, and then taking the steps necessary to secure those areas. It's just going to take. We're going to see how long it's going to take for them to do that, and if the government is going to is going to decrease that time frame by supporting these companies with some financial incentives. So we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, man. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah. I think that's it for our topics.
Yeah,
Yes?
that was our last little bit to review, and we've kind of got up to our hour mark as well.
Yeah.
We're making good time.
We're at an hour. I started my watch probably 10 minutes after, so we're probably about an hour and 10 minutes right now. But great. Yeah, this was just a wrap up of some
little tech news briefing.
Yeah. Some things that are going on right now that we think you guys should be aware of. Please, if you have more questions about the topics that we discussed, please leave some comments down below in the comment section, or shoot us an email. What's that new email that you created for the podcast?
thegeniuspodcast@gmail.com.
Boom. Yeah, you can send us some questions there or your feedback there to that email address. If you are a local here of the Virgin Islands, or you're traveling to the Virgin Islands, and you need some help with any Apple repair products, you can come see us down here in Main Street. We have an Apple repair shop called Joshua the Genius. We fix all Apple products. So if you guys have cracked screens, broken receivers, charging issues, you need a new camera on your phone, definitely come down and see us. Or charging accessories. You can give us a call here at 340-227-3821. I always like to talk about our payment options. Okay, we are accepting cryptocurrency. So we're accepting 5 different forms of cryptocurrency: Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, Ripple, and Dogecoin. Those are the 5 that we're accepting right now. And we do that through a platform hosted by Unstoppable Domains. Unstoppable Domains allows you to create a readable public address so that people can send you cryptocurrencies to a readable address like joshuathegenius.crypto, as opposed to a long alphanumeric of zeros and right.
235.
So Unstoppable Domains converts your public address into a readable domain. And if you need to send us any money, you can do that through joshuathegenius.crypto. If you're a business or an individual that's looking for that service to get you set up, definitely give us a call. We can help you out with that. 340-227-3821. Also, if you are looking to purchase cryptocurrency, there's a great platform out there right now called Coinbase. Coinbase is a free application that you can download through your app store on the iOS platform or Android platform. It's very easy to sign up, and you can start to buy cryptocurrency right in the application. If you use the link down in the details section, you can get 10 free dollars of Bitcoin. Okay, so that's Coinbase. Coinbase is the application, and make sure to use our code below to get 10 free dollars of Bitcoin if you choose so. Anything else you want to add, Sarah?
No, that's it.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for joining. We definitely want to hear you guys' feedback. We appreciate all of our fans and all of our listeners thus far. We're on episode 11, and we have some great things in store for you between now and episode 20. So please stay tuned, and we'll be with you guys shortly. Peace.